when I close my eyes and imagine myself wandering through a gentle forest at the edge of evening, I feel an immediate sense of softness in the air, as though the light itself has decided to rest. The ground beneath me feels cushioned, wrapped in layers of leaves that have fallen over countless seasons. I step slowly, letting my movements match the calm rhythm of the forest's breath. With every step, I feel the quiet presence of something older than the trees, something woven through the soil in patient, unhurried patterns. Even though I cannot see it, I know it's there, forming a world beneath the surface that moves more slowly than anything above. I walk a little deeper, holding on to the peaceful sense that the forest has no expectations of me. It simply exists, welcoming my presence without noise or demand. As the canopy filters the dim light into a soft, cool glow, I begin thinking about the vastness of the fungal networks beneath my feet. It always amazes me how mushrooms, the small and delicate shapes I sometimes see on fallen logs or damp patches of soil, are only the briefest glimpses of a life that mostly remains hidden. Beneath everything, there is a quiet network of threads called mycelium fine, branching filaments that stretch farther than I could ever trace. The more I imagine these threads, the more peaceful they feel. They don't push or pull. They simply continue their slow extension through the soil, curving around stones, slipping into pockets of moisture, and weaving themselves into the very foundation of the forest. The threads are thin, softer than the finest strands of fabric, yet they are connected to one another in a way that creates remarkable strength. They move nutrients from place to place, breaking down what has fallen and returning it to the world as nourishment for plants, trees, and other living beings. Sometimes I pause, right here, in this calm space in my mind, picture the hidden world beneath the forest floor, as if the soil were gently lifted away. In my imagination, I see pale strands branching like roots, spreading out in patterns so intricate they look like quiet artwork created over decades. And in a way, they are. They form naturally, slowly, without effort or noise. They create shapes that shift over time, responding to what they encounter underground. And through all of this, they remain patient. They remain steady. What comforts me most is the idea that these networks are able to connect trees to one another. Scientists describe how one tree might share nutrients with another through these fungal threads. If a tree is struggling, perhaps too shaded, too young, or affected by drought, other trees may send it what it needs through the mycelium. This exchange happens quietly, without fanfare, and without any expectation in return. It is simply part of how life works in these gentle spaces. Thinking about that brings me a sense of calm. Like the forest sets an example for how to move slowly and care quietly. As I wander deeper, I imagine small mushrooms rising above the soil, appearing almost like little lanterns left behind by the earth itself. They appear only when the conditions are right, when moisture lingers in the air, when the soil holds enough softness, when the temperature is calm and cool. Their appearance isn't dramatic or sudden. Instead, it feels like a whisper, a faint suggestion that something beneath them is ready to be seen. They emerge almost timidly, only briefly, before returning to the hidden world below. When I think about how little of a fungus is visible above ground, I feel a sense of humility. The mushrooms I notice on walks, in fields, or along old logs are just small expressions of something far bigger. The true living body, the mycelium, stays beneath the surface, doing its work without needing recognition. It makes me think about how much in life continues quietly, unnoticed, yet essential. The forest thrives because of something that almost never asks to be seen. The soft hush of evening continues to settle around me. I imagine sitting on a bed of moss, letting the coolness of the ground seep through my hands as I rest them gently beside me. Moss always feels like nature's version of a blanket, soft, fresh, and welcoming. While I sit there, I notice how the forest air changes when night approaches. The scent deepens, filled with the earthy scent of damp soil, fallen leaves, and wood that has been touched by countless seasons. Mushrooms thrive in such environments. They draw their strength from moisture and shade, from stillness and time. These conditions help their spores drift, settle, and quietly begin new lives beneath the ground. Spores, I remember, are lighter than any breath I could let out. They move in the quietest way imaginable, carried by tiny gusts of air, by the soft fur of passing animals, or even by the gentle shake of a tree branch overhead. They drift with patience, never attempting to control their destination. They simply allow themselves to settle into the world wherever they may land. That, too, feels soothing, this idea of releasing oneself to the natural flow around us. As I think about spores landing on the forest floor, perhaps in a shaded pocket of soil beneath a fallen branch, I imagine how slowly the next phase begins. The spore extends its first delicate filament, almost hesitantly, like a small hand reaching into the unknown. And then another filament, and another. Each one stretches forward, testing the soil, sensing its surroundings. The process is subtle, almost invisible, yet entirely dependable. Over time, those thin filaments spread outward in all directions, weaving into the larger pattern of mycelium that already exists, or forming a new one all on their own. The thought of such slow creation helps me breathe more steadily. There is something deeply peaceful about knowing that so much life happens quietly, in places we rarely look, far from the noise of the surface world. The forest does not rush. It doesn't hurry for growth or change. It lets everything unfold at the pace nature intended, whether that pace is measured in days, weeks, or centuries. I think about how certain mycelial networks could be older than entire forests. Some have grown across vast stretches of land, touching root systems and soil layers that have witnessed more seasons than any living creature above them. And still, they don't reveal themselves. They continue their quiet work underground, maintaining the balance of the ecosystem they support. These networks shift slowly, responding to moisture, temperature, nutrients, and even the health of nearby plants. They adjust without panic, without force, simply moving where they are needed. I let my mind drift toward how the forest might feel if I could sense those underground threads. Perhaps the ground would feel warmer in places where activity is stronger. Perhaps certain paths would feel softer, more interconnected. I like imagining that every step I take touches thousands of filaments beneath me, each one continuing its life with patience. It makes me feel connected to something larger, something steady and calm. The forest at night offers a stillness that feels almost like a blanket. The air relaxes, the sounds soften, the leaves settle, and in that gentle quiet, the mushrooms tucked beneath the trees seem like part of the night's peaceful rhythm. They don't need to grow tall or bright. They don't need to attract attention. They exist as they are, humble, essential, quietly beautiful, as moonlight filters through the branches. Faint and silvery, I imagine a small cluster of mushrooms near my feet. Their caps glisten slightly with leftover moisture, and their stems stand firm yet fragile. These mushrooms likely formed only in the last few days, shaped slowly by the conditions around them. They might release their spores tonight or tomorrow, allowing the cycle to continue. And once their moment is done, they will return to the soil, becoming nourishment for new life that remains unseen. It is this cycle, the gentle rising, the quiet resting, the patient returning, that helps the forest remain alive. And the fungi beneath everything keep this cycle moving with soft, steady effort. They break down fallen branches, soften tough bark, and help leaves turn into rich soil. They connect trees, support roots, and guide nutrients across distances. Their work is silent but powerful, humble but lasting. As I sit with these thoughts, I notice how they shift something inside me. I feel calmer, as though my own pace has slowed to match the steady rhythm of the forest. The hidden world beneath the soil shows me that life doesn't always need to be visible to matter. It doesn't need speed to make an impact. It doesn't need noise to be meaningful. Sometimes the quietest processes are the ones that hold everything together. In that sense, mushrooms feel like symbols of a kind of peace the world often forgets. They teach me that it's all right to move slowly, to take time, to grow in ways no one sees, and to rise into view only when conditions feel right. They remind me that even when everything on the surface feels uncertain, there may be something steady beneath it all. Holding everything gently in place, I breathe in deeply, imagining the cool forest air filling my lungs, and I let it out with the same ease that spores drift from a mushroom's gills. I imagine myself rising from the moss, taking one last slow look around the dim forest, and continuing along the soft path ahead. I feel guided by the quiet presence beneath, mere presence that never rushes, never demands, simply exists in peaceful patience. When I let my mind drift back to the quiet forest from before, I find myself kneeling gently at the edge of the soil, as if I'm preparing to look beneath the surface without disturbing anything that rests there. The light is dim, the air cool, and the forest has settled into that calm state where every sound feels softened by distance. In this stillness, I begin thinking about the soft patterns of mycelium, the delicate, branching networks that form the true body of fungi. Even though I cannot see them directly, imagining them helps me sink deeper into a slow and peaceful rhythm, almost as though my breath could follow their pathways underground. The more I imagine these networks, the more I begin to sense their quiet intelligence. Not intelligence in the way we often think of it, not loud, not calculating, not racing forward, but something far slower, more ancient, and deeply patient. Mycelium grows by extending tiny filaments called hyphae, thin as strands of mist, too fine for the eye to see without help. Each filament stretches forward only a small amount at a time. It might pause, sense its surroundings, and then turn ever so slightly to follow moisture or drift around a tiny stone. The movement is so gentle, so restrained, that imagining it feels like slowing my own thoughts to match its pace. As the filaments spread, they begin forming a kind of natural map beneath the soil, one that transforms over days, weeks, and years. The patterns are not deliberate in a conscious sense, yet they serve a purpose. They help the fungi find nutrients, reach for water, and encounter roots and organisms that will become part of a larger, interconnected system. When I picture these patterns, I see branching, weaving, curling lines, each one searching for balance. Some areas grow dense, like soft clusters of thread, while others stretch thin and spare. Following the contours of the earth, there is something deeply soothing about the way mycelium forms. These patterns without force, it never pushes aggressively through the soil. It simply moves into spaces where it can grow, adjusting itself with soft, quiet persistence. If it reaches a barrier rock, a dry patch, or an area without nutrients, it doesn't struggle or break itself against the obstacle. It gently curves around it, continuing its slow journey in a new direction. The network grows with an effortless acceptance of the world around it, adapting rather than resisting. I picture myself sitting beside a fallen log, gently brushing away a few loose leaves as I imagine the mycelium beneath. Fallen wood often becomes a favorite place for these networks. The log, once part of a living tree, begins its slow return to the earth, and mycelium plays a patient role in guiding that process. The filaments seep into tiny cracks in the bark, exploring the dark interior, finding pockets where nutrients still linger. The wood does not break down quickly. It takes years, sometimes decades, to soften fully and merge back into the soil. But mycelium is not in a hurry. It works with the quiet rhythm of time itself. As the log transforms, the white threads of the fungi spread further, moving through the wood like gentle veins. They help break down cellulose and lignin materials, too tough for most organisms to digest. But the fungi do not attack these materials. They simply release enzymes that soften them, easing the log from one state of being into another. The slow transformation feels almost like a form of care. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is lost. Everything is brought back into the cycle in a way that feels peaceful and natural. I let my imagination wander deeper into the underground world. Mycelium does not grow only beneath trees or in wood. It spreads through the soil itself, weaving around roots that reach down from above. Many of these roots form partnerships with the fungi. The mycelium wraps itself around or within the root tips, creating a mutual exchange that helps both sides thrive. The plant offers sugars it makes through sunlight, and the fungi provide minerals and water gathered from the soil. The exchange is gentle, quiet, and constant. It happens without noise, without tension, and without interruption, like a slow and steady breath shared between two beings. Thinking about this relationship always soothes me. There is something comforting about knowing that beneath every forest, every meadow, and even under many gardens, these connections form naturally. They serve as a reminder that cooperation is as much a part of nature as competition, and that sometimes the most important relationships are the ones that remain unseen. Mycelium does not boast about the nutrients it carries. It simply does what it must, helping the plants grow stronger, taller, and more resilient. In return, the plants offer energy that helps the fungi continue their slow, steady journey. As I follow these thoughts, I imagine what it might feel like to move through the soil as a thread of mycelium. There is darkness everywhere, yet it is not frightening darkness. It is calm, quiet, and full of life. The soil holds moisture, warmth, and countless tiny spaces to explore. Every grain of dirt, every small pebble, every fragment of decaying leaf becomes part of the landscape. I imagine extending forward, sensing the softness of the soil ahead, turning gently when needed, spreading into new spaces without effort or anxiety. The process feels meditative, almost like drifting in a warm pool where movement comes naturally. The underground environment is rich with other forms of life. Tiny organisms, bacteria, and small insects all play their roles in the ecosystem. Mycelium weaves among them without disturbance, interacting only when necessary. It is not a predator. It is not a threat. It is simply a carrier of nutrients, moving slowly through the soil like a quiet current. Sometimes it encounters roots of plants it has never touched before, and it explores them delicately, determining whether a partnership might form. Other times it moves past them, continuing its gentle search for what the soil has to offer. Mycelium also helps hold the soil together. Its threads bind particles in place, strengthening the ground and helping prevent erosion. Even though the threads are delicate, together they form a network that anchors the earth with surprising stability. Imagining this makes me feel grounded as well, as though I too can find strength through quiet connections and gentle presence rather than force or resistance. There is another layer of the fungal network that brings me peace. Whenever I think about it, some mycelial systems are so large and interconnected that they stretch across vast landscapes. In places where the environment has remained stable for centuries, mycelium has grown uninterrupted, forming networks that may be thousands of years old. These networks outlast storms, droughts, and changing seasons. They continue their slow growth year after year, adapting as needed, surviving with quiet patience. They are among the largest living organisms on the planet, and yet they stay hidden beneath the soil, asking for nothing, needing no recognition. When I think about such ancient networks, I imagine age not as something heavy or tired, but as something soft, steady, and deeply rooted. Longevity in the fungal world does not come from competition or dominance. It comes from balance, from listening to the soil, from understanding how to grow without overwhelming, how to reach without grasping. The patterns of these networks evolve slowly, responding to moisture, temperature, nutrients, and the presence of other life forms. They are flexible, not rigid, adaptive, not stubborn. They show me that resilience often comes from gentleness rather than strength. My mind drifts back to the forest floor. I imagine pressing my hand lightly against the ground, feeling the coolness of the soil beneath my palm. Somewhere beneath that surface, the mycelium continues to weave. It does not pause simply because I am thinking about it. It does not change its pace. It remains constant, moving through its world with the same steady calm it has held for countless years. The thought brings me a sense of comfort, as though the earth itself is quietly supporting everything above it. Sometimes I picture patterns of mycelium glowing softly, not with visible light, but with an imagined calm energy that spreads through the ground like a slow pulse. The networks connect trees, bushes, wildflowers, fallen logs, and tiny seedlings just beginning their lives. Through these connections, the forest functions as a single, interconnected community. Nutrients move from one area to another, helping plants survive difficult conditions. Even dying trees contribute to the system, offering their remaining energy and materials to younger life through the fungal networks. This circular flow feels peaceful, like the forest breathes in long, unhurried cycles. The more I sit with these thoughts, the more I realize that mycelium embodies a kind of patience that is rare in the visible world. It never tries to rush from one place to another. It never demands immediate change. It accepts the limits of its environment and grows within them, gently exploring every possibility the soil offers. It teaches me, in its own quiet way, that slow progress can be meaningful, that unseen work can be powerful, and that subtle movements can shape the entire landscape over time. I stay a moment longer with the image of those patterns, spreading softly beneath the forest. I imagine myself tracing them with my fingertips, following each branch, each curve, each delicate thread. Even though I know I can't see them, the visualization feels vivid in my mind. The network stretches far, touching roots I cannot reach, wrapping around stones I cannot move, forming connections I cannot fully imagine. Yet everything remains peaceful. Everything remains gentle. Eventually, I take a slow breath, letting the calm settle deeper inside me. The forest remains in its quiet state, resting beneath the evening sky. The mycelium continues to weave its patterns, hidden but essential, soft but strong, patient but alive. When I think about spores, I always picture the smallest possible beginnings, weightless particles that drift through the forest with the softness of a sigh. They are so light, so delicate, that even the faintest movement of air can carry them farther than I could ever walk in a day. I imagine them rising quietly from beneath the protective cap of a mushroom, slipping into the evening air as though they were exhaled from the earth itself. There is no rush in their movement, no noise, no urgency. Only a slow release into the open world, carried gently by forces far larger and calmer than themselves. I like to imagine one spore in particular, just for a moment, even though millions are released at once. It sits nestled among thousands of others, waiting in the cool darkness beneath the mushroom cap. The gills shelter it, keeping it safe until the conditions are just rightened, till the humidity is balanced, until the air is still, until the night feels ready to receive something so small. And then, almost without any movement at all, the spore lets go. It doesn't leap or burst. It simply releases itself, trusting in the steadiness of the world around it as it drifts downward. The spore is caught by a gentle current of air, the kind that feels like the soft brush of breath on the back of a hand. It rises slightly, almost lifting itself, though it is really the forest's quiet exhalation that carries it upward. It turns effortlessly, weightless in the dark, and begins its patient journey. This is the moment I find most calming. The moment when the spore leaves the mushroom and begins to wander without any sense of destination. It moves the way thoughts drift before sleep, unhurried and free, guided only by the subtle rhythms around them. Sometimes I picture thousands of spores drifting at once, creating a soft, invisible cloud above the forest floor. In reality, this happens every day, every night, all across the world. Mushrooms release billions of spores throughout their lifetimes, and each one floats independently, carried by air, water, animals, or simply the pull of gravity. I imagine the forest filled with these tiny travelers, all moving with a kind of peaceful uncertainty, not seeking control over where they will land, but simply allowing themselves to be guided. What comforts me most is that spores hold everything necessary for new life, yet they carry no expectations. They move quietly, without pressure, without a predetermined path. They embody a kind of trust in the world, trust that whatever happens, happens slowly and naturally. When I think about them, I find myself relaxing, feeling that same gentle trust settling into my own breathing as the spore drifts. I imagine the quiet details of its surroundings. The forest at night feels cooler, filled with the soft scent of damp soil and growing things. Leaves rustle far above, their movements so delicate that it sounds like whispers blending into the darkness. The spore floats through pockets of cool air and slightly warmer currents, rising and falling in small, slow motions. It may brush gently against a piece of bark or glide past the trunk of a tall tree before continuing on its way. Everything is calm. Everything is slow. Spores can travel incredible distances, sometimes riding air currents for miles before they descend. Some land close to where they began. Others drift into entirely new environments. It doesn't matter to them. They do not cling to any direction. They simply allow the world's currents to guide them, responding to the smallest variations in temperature, humidity, and airflow. I let my mind follow one spore as it continues drifting through the quiet forest. Perhaps it catches a faint breeze that moves through the underbrush, lifting it just slightly higher. It passes the branches of a shrub, moves gently between the dark outlines of ferns, and drifts over a fallen log softened by years of slow decay. The forest around it seems enormous in comparison, yet the spore floats with complete ease, unbothered by the scale of its surroundings. Eventually, the spore begins to descend, not because it chooses to, but because the air has grown still again. The gentle current that carried it so far has faded into the coolness of the night. Its fall is soft, barely noticeable. It settles onto the forest floor with a touch lighter than dust, joining the moss, leaves, soil, and other spores that have arrived before it. There is no sound, no movement, only the quiet sense that something new might one day grow from this tiny arrival. But the journey does not end upon landing. Spores do not immediately begin to grow. They wait. They rest in the soil, letting time pass with the ease of something that has no schedule to follow. They respond only to moisture and warmth, letting these gentle cues determine whether conditions are right for the next step. If the soil is too dry, the spore simply waits. If the temperature is too low, it waits. If the environment lacks nutrients, it waits. This waiting does not feel restless or empty. It feels natural, peaceful, and patient, much like the stillness one feels before drifting into sleep. When the moment does become right, when a soft rain has passed through, when the soil has warmed just enough, when the world feels ready for something new, the spore begins to open. It does not burst or crack with force. Instead, it extends a tiny filament, quieter than the smallest breath. This filament reaches gently into the surrounding soil, exploring in slow, delicate movements. Then another filament follows, and another, each one branching and reaching outward. Together, they begin forming a new mycelial network. One so small at first that it would be invisible even if the soil were lifted away. I find this beginning especially calming. It unfolds with such softness, such natural grace. The mycelium grows gradually, branching into pathways that seem to follow a rhythm only the earth understands. These threads seek nutrients in the soil, teeny particles of decaying leaves, fragments of wood, or minerals released from old roots. When the mycelium finds these sources, it absorbs them gently, transforming them into the building blocks of its own growth. Nothing about this process feels rushed. It is quiet, patient work, carried out in darkness, far from the urgency of the surface world. As the mycelium spreads, it may encounter other networks nearby. Sometimes they merge, forming larger, stronger systems. Other times they coexist, weaving around one another without conflict. The soil becomes a living tapestry, shaped by countless strands that all move with the same steady, unhurried intention to grow, to connect, and to support life around them. Even though this process is so gradual, the changes it creates are profound. The growing network may eventually produce mushrooms, small signals of the hidden life below. These mushrooms rise only when the conditions feel gentle and nurturing. They appear briefly, release their spores, and then return to the soil. The cycle begins again, always calm, always patient, always guided by the subtle rhythms of the earth. While I sit quietly imagining all this, I realize how comforting the entire cycle feels. Spores remind me that beginnings do not need to be dramatic. Growth can be invisible for long stretches of time. Progress does not have to shout or rush. It can unfold softly, guided by conditions we cannot always see. The spores drift without control, settle without force, and grow only when the world is ready to hold them. There is something deeply restful in that. I breathe slowly, matching the gentle drift of the spores in my imagination. I picture them floating through forests of every kind, temperate, tropical, boreal lich, carrying its own world of silent movement. I imagine them resting in soil across mountains, fields, and old woodlands. Through all these places, spores continue their journeys, always quiet, always patient. What I love most about spores is that they embody the softest form of life's persistence. They do not push. They do not demand. They simply continue their gentle journeys, trusting that if the right moment comes, they will grow. And if it doesn't, they wait peacefully, becoming part of the forest's quiet fabric. As I allow these thoughts to settle, I feel a looseness in my shoulders, a lightness in my breath, a peaceful softening in my mind. The world of spores moves at the perfect pace for drifting into rest, slow, calm, gentle, unhurried. And in this rhythm, I find myself easing deeper into quietness. When I picture the quiet darkness of a nighttime forest, I often imagine a soft, gentle glow resting between the roots of old trees. It's not the kind of bright, striking light that startles the eyes. Instead, it feels like something whispered into the shadows, a glow so faint that you might walk past it during the day without ever noticing the mushrooms that create it. But at night, when the world becomes still, these tiny patches of light emerge like little breaths from the earth itself, bioluminescent. Fungi have always fascinated me because they do not shine in a way that demands attention. Their glow is subtle, like an exhale meant only for the quiet places that surround them. When I imagine these fungi, I see a gentle greenish or bluish shimmer glowing from the underside of fallen logs, from the cracks of soft, decaying wood, or from the delicate caps that rise above a bed of moist leaves. Their light does not flicker like a candle or pulse like a firefly. It simply rests, scum, steady, and patient. Sometimes, when my mind is tired or restless, I visualize myself walking slowly through such a forest. The path is dim, touched only by moonlight filtering through the branches above. The air feels cool and peaceful, and the smell of damp soil rises gently with each step I take. As I move deeper into this imagined forest, I begin to notice spots of faint illumination scattered near the ground. Each glow is small, but together they create a quiet constellation of earthly stars. I approach one glowing patch and kneel beside it, letting my breath fall into a slow, easy rhythm. Beneath a piece of fallen bark, I imagine seeing a cluster of tiny mushrooms. Their caps are smooth and rounded, and from their gills, a soft green light drifts outward. The glow is so gentle that I almost wonder whether my eyes are imagining it, but as I blink and look again, the light remains. It's steady, as though the mushrooms have been glowing long before I arrived and will continue glowing long after I leave. The calmness of that thought settles into me. As steady as the glow itself, these fungi do not produce their light to impress or attract attention. They do not brighten or dim depending on who might be near. Their glow is simply a natural part of their existence, created by slow chemical processes within their cells. It's a reminder that the world can hold beauty that never asks to be noticed. Beauty that exists softly, quietly, and gently. Scientists explain that bioluminescence in fungi happens through a chemical reaction involving a substance called luciferin and an enzyme called luciferase. When these components come together in the presence of oxygen, they produce light. But even when I think about this explanation, it feels soothing rather than scientific. There is no intensity in the reaction, no sparks or heat. The light that emerges is cool and calm, like the soft glow of a nighttime memory. As I sit beside that glowing patch in the forest, I imagine reaching out and very gently touching the fallen bark, feeling the dampness that clings to it. The glow does not brighten with my touch, nor does it fade. It remains steady, as if the mushrooms are content with their own quiet presence. It reminds me of how some things in life stay steady regardless of who notices them. They shine in their own way, without hurry, without change, and without need for acknowledgement. I let myself wander further along the imagined path, where more bioluminescent fungi appear in small groups. Some cluster in tight circles, others scatter individually, like soft beads of light resting on the soil. Each tiny glow seems to mark a gentle moment of transformation, a small piece of decaying wood turning slowly into nourishment for the forest through the patient work of the fungi. The thought feels comforting. Nothing is wasted here. Everything becomes part of the cycle at just the right time. With no rush, I pause again, listening to the faint sounds of the forest. I imagine the distant rustle of small animals moving through the leaves, the occasional soft flutter of wings in the trees above, and the quiet hum of the night. These sounds do not disturb the glow. Instead, they seem to belong naturally alongside it. Bioluminescent fungi have existed in forests long before humans began observing them. Their glow is part of the nighttime landscape, a gentle thread woven into the larger tapestry of life. There is an old idea among some researchers that the glow may help attract insects, which then help spread fungal spores. Whether that is fully true or simply one of many possibilities, the thought feels peaceful to me. The fungi glow quietly, and small creatures come near, drawn to the gentle light. They carry spores to new places, allowing the hidden networks beneath the soil to continue growing. It's a soft, reciprocal relationship, no force, no urgency, just quiet interactions guided by nature's rhythms. I continue walking, imagining a fallen log covered in glowing threads of fungus. Some species don't just illuminate their mushrooms, they also light up their mycelium, the branching filaments beneath the surface of the wood. In the darkness, this creates a soft, lace-like pattern of light, spreading across the log in delicate lines. It looks like an intricate map drawn by the forest itself. The glow is faint, almost fragile, but it carries a sense of patience, stretching slowly through the wood as the fungus breaks it down over time. As I trace the glowing patterns with my eyes, I think about how long it takes for a piece of wood to return to the soil. The process is slow, measured in months or years. And yet, the fungi work without hurry, gently softening the wood grain, releasing nutrients, and creating space for new life to take root. The glow, then, feels like a quiet symbol of this transformation. It marks the presence of a process that is both patient and essential. I rise again and continue down the peaceful path. The forest around me feels like a quiet sanctuary, illuminated only by the smallest, softest points of light. There is no fear in the darkness. Instead, there is a sense of calm, as though the forest is resting deeply. The glow of the fungi feels almost like a lullaby from the soil, softening the edges of the night and filling it with a gentle comfort in some parts of the world. People call these glowing fungi foxfire, a name that feels delicate and almost mythical. I imagine how travelers centuries ago might have walked through dark woodlands and noticed the faint glow beneath the trees. Perhaps they paused, kneeling beside the glowing bark, feeling the same sense of wonder and calm that I imagine now. The light would have been mysterious then, but also reassuring, reminder that even in darkness, there are small sources of guidance and presence. I think about how rare it is to see light produced by living creatures. Fireflies shimmer in the air, certain ocean creatures glow beneath the waves, and a few fungi shine in the quiet of the forest. These moments of natural light feel special, not because they are bright or dramatic, but because they appear where we least expect them. They remind us that life finds gentle ways to express itself, even in the stillest places. I keep walking, until I find a small clearing where the glow from the fungi mixes softly with the pale silver of the moon. The two lights blend together in a peaceful harmony, one from the sky, distant and ancient, the other from the earth, quiet and patient. Standing in that clearing, I feel as though I'm held between two gentle sources of calm. The world feels balanced here, with light above and light below, neither overpowering the other. I sit in the clearing and allow my mind to soften. The glowing fungi become like tiny companions in the darkness, keeping me company without sound or movement. Their light feels steady, quiet, and reassuring. I imagine resting there for a long time, watching the glow shift slightly as the mushrooms breathe moisture in and out of the night air. Their presence encourages me to breathe more deeply, more slowly, letting my thoughts settle like soft leaves onto the forest floor. After a while, I imagine laying my hand gently on the soil near the glowing mushrooms. The earth feels cool and firm, filled with countless hidden threads and processes I cannot see. Yet, the glow reminds me that these hidden processes are alive and active, even in stillness. The world beneath the surface moves with a slow, thoughtful rhythm that feels comforting to connect with. I take in the scene once more, the faint lights scattered among the roots, the gentle curve of the fallen logs, the quiet rustle of leaves overhead. Everything feels unhurried, as though time itself has softened. The glow of the fungi is not a signal of urgency. It is a symbol of patience. It shines because the fungi are simply being themselves, living quietly within their natural rhythms. Eventually, I imagine myself rising from the clearing and walking onward, leaving the glowing patches behind me. But even as I move away, their presence lingers in my mind, reminding me that gentleness exists even in the darkest spaces. The silent glow becomes a memory I can carry, a reminder that light does not need to be bright to be meaningful, and that calm does not need to be empty to be comforting. The forest grows darker as I continue my slow path, but I no longer feel the darkness in the same way. It feels softer now, filled with quiet life and gentle rhythms. The glow of the fungi has shown me that even the hidden parts of the world carry their own light, steady and patient. And with that thought, I breathe deeply and let myself settle into the peacefulness around me. When I let my thoughts drift back into the forest, the first thing I notice is the quiet weight of the air, as if the trees themselves are holding a long, patient breath. The forest seems calm on the surface, but beneath that calm lies an entire hidden rhythm, one that keeps everything in balance. As I walk slowly through this peaceful landscape in my mind, I begin thinking about how much of this balance comes from the soft, persistent work of mushrooms and the larger fungal world they belong to. Their influence is subtle and often invisible, yet it supports nearly every corner of the ecosystem, I take another slow step, letting the leaves beneath my feet settle with a gentle whisper. The sound is so faint it almost feels like an exhale. It reminds me of how mushrooms appear after rain quietly, without drawing attention to themselves. They rise from the soil not as declarations, but as soft reminders of the work happening beneath me at every moment. That work, the constant transformation of what has fallen into what will nourish the forest again, is one of the most peaceful cycles I can imagine. When I think about this cycle, I picture a fallen log resting across the forest floor, still and unmoving. Its bark is worn, softened by time and weather. It looks silent, but in truth, it is alive with activity. Mushrooms often find their home on such logs. Their mycelium stretches deep inside the wood, gently breaking it down. The process is slow and patient, unfolding over years rather than days, but it never stops. The fungi release special enzymes that dissolve the log's fibers, turning something once strong and rigid into something soft and nourishing. It's not destruction, it's renewal. It's a quiet return of old life to the earth. I move my hand in my imagination along the rough surface of the log, feeling the faint give beneath my fingers. Beneath the surface, the fungi are changing everything little by little. They are taking what can no longer stand tall and helping it become part of the soil that will support new growth. I find comfort in that idea. The forest doesn't treat fallen things as waste. It treats them as beginnings, and mushrooms play a gentle role in making that transformation possible. Sometimes, I imagine how long a piece of wood might wait before fungi find it. Maybe it fell in a storm decades ago. Maybe it lay untouched for seasons, collecting moss, gathering moisture, resting quietly in the shade. But eventually, spores drift onto it, some carried by wind, some carried by insects, and some brought by animals unknowingly. When the spores settle into the tiny cracks of the wood, they begin their slow journey inward. They don't rush. They don't force their way. They simply ease into the spaces time has created, moving deeper only when the wood is soft enough to welcome them. Once inside, the mycelium expands in delicate patterns. It spreads through the fibers, finding what it needs to thrive. At first, the changes are too subtle for me to see. But over months and years, the log becomes lighter, more hollow, more welcoming of other forms of life. Moss may grow brighter across its surface. Tiny insects may find shelter within its remaining structure. Small plants may take root nearby, nourished by the softer soil forming around the decaying wood. The fungi never claim credit for this. They simply continue their slow, essential work. As I continue my gentle walk through the forest in my mind, I notice how the entire environment feels like a balance of giving and receiving. Trees drop their leaves every year. Branches fall. Roots shift. Nothing stays the same forever. But because fungi break down what falls, the forest floor never becomes overwhelmed. Instead, those fallen pieces are returned to the soil. They become part of the foundation that supports new trees, new plants, new life. If the forest had no fungi, it would be cluttered with debris and starved of nutrients. But thanks to them, everything remains in harmony. I pause near another fallen tree, one that has been on the ground much longer than the first. This one is softer, almost spongy underfoot. When I imagine pressing my hand against it, I can feel the gentle give of its surface. The wood is breaking down into something closer to soil, and along its surface, mushrooms appear like quiet markers of time. Their caps are small, rounded, and delicate. They grow in clusters, almost like tiny umbrellas arranged to protect the forest floor. They rise from the decomposing wood with no urgency, simply responding to the moisture and nutrients around them. I imagine leaning closer to these mushrooms, observing the tiny ridges beneath their caps. These ridges hold the spores that will drift away one day, continuing the cycle. They are not dramatic or large. They are subtle and soft, perfectly suited to their purpose. Their work isn't meant to be noticed in the moment. It's meant to be felt over time, as the forest slowly shifts from one season to another. Thinking about this, I begin to sense how much fungi contribute to the forest's health. They don't just break down what has fallen. They help build the soil itself. As fungi decompose organic material, they leave behind rich, dark layers of soil that are full of nutrients. This soil supports the roots of plants, helping them grow stronger. It absorbs water more effectively, preventing erosion and helping sustain the forest during dry periods. It becomes home to insects, small animals, and microorganisms that add even more layers of life to the ecosystem. All of this begins with the patient work of fungi. As I continue through the forest, I notice how the trees rely on this renewed soil. Their roots stretch through it, absorbing the nutrients that fungi helped release. In return, the trees feed the fungi with sugars produced through photosynthesis. It's a gentle exchange, a quiet cooperation that takes place below the surface. Some trees even use fungi to share resources with one another. If one tree has more than it needs, it might send extra nutrients through the fungal network to another tree that is struggling. This cooperation makes the forest feel like a community, one that functions not through competition, but through balance. I imagine sitting beside a tall tree whose roots twist through the ground like soft, curved branches. Somewhere within those roots, mycelium threads weave in and out like strands in a tapestry. The connection is deep and symbiotic. The fungi help the tree absorb water and minerals that would otherwise be out of reach. In return, the tree helps the fungi survive by offering the sugars it has made using sunlight. Neither dominates the other. Neither demands anything. They simply exist together in mutual support. This relationship extends across entire forests, creating networks that link plants in ways that feel almost comforting. It reminds me that even the tallest trees depend on gentle, unseen help. It reminds me that growth often relies on cooperation far beneath the surface, in places few ever see. And it reminds me that some of the most important work happens only when everything else becomes quiet. As I sit beneath the tree, I listen to the faint rustle of leaves overhead. The breeze is soft, barely strong enough to move them, but the sound carries a sense of calm. Mushrooms, I realize, reflect that same calm in their role within the forest. They don't grow quickly. They don't work loudly. They take their time, honoring the pace of natural cycles. They break down what has finished its journey and prepare the ground for what is yet to come. I imagine how mushrooms help maintain the balance of nutrients in the forest. When they break down organic matter, they release nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and other elements needed for life. These nutrients return to the soil slowly, allowing plants to absorb them gradually. This steady release helps maintain a peaceful equilibrium. If nutrients were released too quickly, they would wash away. If they were locked up forever, the soil would grow poor. But fungi keep everything in balance by moving at a pace that matches the needs of living things. As I think about this, I begin to understand how the forest stays resilient. Storms may come, seasons may change, trees may fall, But fungi continue their quiet work regardless. They help the forest recover by clearing old material and enriching the soil. Even after fires, fungi are among the first to return, breaking down charred remains and preparing the ground for new plants to grow. Their patience ensures that life continues. Even after difficult moments, I rise gently from where I've been resting in my imagination and continue along the forest path. I look around, noticing how many different mushrooms appear in different places. Some along the roots of old trees, some on moss-covered stumps, some on the forest floor itself. Their shapes vary, but their purpose remains connected. Each one contributes to the balance of the forest in its own gentle way. As I walk, I see a cluster of tiny mushrooms growing in a circular fairy ring. These rings form as the mycelium beneath expands outward in a large, circular pattern. The mushrooms appear at the edges, marking the boundary of that growth. The ring is not magical in the traditional sense, but there is a kind of quiet magic in how naturally it forms. It reflects how fungi grow in harmony with the land around them, responding to soil, moisture, and time. Standing before the ring, I feel a sense of peaceful symmetry. It reminds me that balance in nature is not forced. It emerges naturally when each part plays its role. Fungi help maintain that balance by ensuring that nothing in the forest is wasted. Not a leaf, not a branch, not a fallen tree. Everything becomes part of the cycle again through their patient work. As night begins to settle into my imagined forest, the air cools even more. The scent of damp soil deepens. The mushrooms glow softly in the dim light, not with luminescence, but with presence. They stand quietly, doing their part, asking for nothing. Their role in the forest is humble and essential. They help maintain balance simply by being what they are. I take one last slow breath, letting the calm of this place settle into me. The balance that mushrooms create is not dramatic. It is gentle. It is persistent. It is steady. And it reminds me that peace often comes from allowing things to unfold naturally, from letting go of urgency, and from trusting the quiet processes that support us even when we cannot see them. Asterisk. When I imagine walking through a gentle forest after a light rain, I often find myself slowing down, almost without realizing it. The air feels fresh, softened by the moisture that lingers on leaves and soil, and everything seems to move at a quieter pace. In moments like these, I notice the shapes of mushrooms more clearly. They appear in so many forms, some round, some slender, some layered like tiny shelves. Each one seems to exist with the same quiet confidence, as though their shapes were formed by the forest itself. As I wander deeper along the soft path, I begin to notice how each mushroom seems shaped not for attention, but for purpose. Some rise with smooth domes, perfectly curved to shed droplets of water so the delicate gills beneath them stay protected. Others spread out wide and flat, almost like little tables, catching bits of falling debris that slowly break down into nourishment. There are mushrooms with tall, narrow stems, their tops balanced like gentle umbrellas, and others that seem to melt gracefully outward from fallen logs, forming curved ledges that look like small, natural steps. Each of these shapes feels peaceful to me. None of them look rushed or forced. They seem to grow in the way that suits them best, shaped by the quiet conditions around them, the moisture in the air, the softness of the soil, the shade of nearby trees. It makes me think about how deeply connected mushrooms are to their environment. Their shapes are responses, not declarations. They are expressions of the world that holds them. As I continue walking, I picture tiny mushrooms with delicate translucent stems that sway gently when a breeze passes. They almost look like little lanterns, glowing softly in the dim forest light. Their caps are thin and pale, shaped like tiny bells. When I imagine leaning closer, I feel as though each one holds a small stillness, a reminder that beauty doesn't need to be bold to be felt. Then there are the coral-like mushrooms that grow in branching formations, rising from the soil like soft underwater gardens. Their shape is intricate, yet it grows so naturally, each branch developing at its own slow pace. These mushrooms feel particularly peaceful to me because they seem to blur the line between forest and sea. They make the ground feel like a quiet reef, painted in soft creams, pale yellows, and light tans that blend effortlessly with the earth around them. Sometimes I notice tiny cup-shaped mushrooms that look like they were carved gently into the soil. They catch droplets of water inside their rounded forms, holding them like small bowls. The water sits there until the forest slowly drinks it back into the ground. Even these little shapes seem to serve a purpose, helping the surrounding soil retain moisture in calm, subtle ways. As I take in these shapes one by one, I start to feel the slow rhythm of the forest settling deeper into my breathing. There is something soothing about the variety. Nothing repeats exactly. Even mushrooms of the same species often grow with small differences, slightly wider caps, slightly taller stems, slightly different curves. These differences make each mushroom feel individual, shaped by the unique moment and place where it grew. I imagine kneeling beside a fallen log, gently running my fingers along the bark. Tiny shelves of bracket fungi grow along its length, each layer forming smooth, rounded curves that overlap like soft waves. These shapes feel timeless, as if they're slowly painting rings of life along the wood. They remind me that decay is not an ending, but a transformation, carried out through calm and steady work. Fungi like these help return the log to the soil. They break down the tough wood fibers, turning them into soft, rich earth over months and years. Their shapes, layered, curved, and patient, mirror the work they do. Nothing is hurried. The transformation happens quietly, almost as though the fungi are whispering the log back into the forest floor. As I rise and continue along the path, I see mushrooms that resemble small stars opening their arms. These are earth stars with outer layers that peel back like petals, revealing a small round center. When they open, they look like tiny forest flowers, though they do not bloom in the usual sense. They are shaped to respond to moisture, opening when the air is damp and curling back inward when it dries. Their movement is slow, gentle, and aligned with the pace of the forest. Farther along the path, I see puffball mushrooms, soft and peaceful. They sit on the ground like little cushions, blending into the earth with their muted colors. When they mature, they release spores through a small opening at the top, sending a gentle puff into the air whenever something brushes against them. Their spherical shapes feel comforting, like small reminders that nature often chooses simplicity when it can dot as I walk. I think about how mushroom shapes help them complete their quiet life cycles. Some are shaped to protect delicate gills beneath their caps. Others grow in layers to spread spores more efficiently. Some grow downward like icicles, forming long dangling teeth called spines that release spores from their tips. Each shape is a response to the environment, a solution found through time, and a design refined through patience. I imagine standing in a grove where sunlight barely touches the ground. In the dimness, I see mushrooms with deep, rich colors, dark reds, soft browns, pale yellows, and even glowing whites. Their shapes vary just as much as their shades. Some look like smooth domes placed gently on forest pillars, while others look like small sculptures rising from the soil. The diversity feels peaceful, not overwhelming. It feels like the forest quietly expressing itself through form. Thinking about these shapes fills me with a calm appreciation for how much life flows around us without needing to be loud. Each mushroom shape tells a story of survival, adaptation, and quiet purpose. None of them exist to dazzle or astonish. They simply live, shaped by what they need, growing in ways that suit their hidden connections to the mycelial world below. I find comfort in knowing that these shapes emerge only when the time is right. A mushroom grows because the mycelium beneath it has decided conditions are ready. It rises slowly, expands gently, and stays only long enough to release its spores. Then it retreats, returning to the soil, leaving only its shape behind in memory. This cycle feels like a soft reminder that everything has its own timing, its own pace. As the forest around me grows quieter, I picture myself sitting beside a patch of small mushrooms. Their shapes vary from one to another, each one unique in its own simple way. They stand together like a peaceful gathering, each contributing its quiet presence to the moment. I listen to the stillness around them, the soft whispers of the wind brushing through the leaves, the distant hum of evening settling in. In that moment, I realize how soothing it is to simply observe the gentle diversity of mushroom shapes. They teach me that differences can feel natural and harmonious. That variation is not chaos, but a quiet reflection of the world's many conditions and needs. There is no hurry for them to become anything other than what they are. I breathe slowly, letting that lesson drift through me like a soft breeze. The mushrooms before me remain still, shaped by calm growth, shaped by the forest's embrace, shaped by time itself, and in their peaceful diversity, I find a sense of quiet comfort. When I think about how humans and mushrooms have lived alongside each other through time, I always feel a soft sense of familiarity, almost as though we have been quiet neighbors, sharing the same gentle landscape for far longer than we ever realized. As I imagine myself resting in a peaceful place, perhaps sitting near the edge of a forest or beside a lightly shaded path, I let my thoughts drift slowly to the ways mushrooms have supported people, guided them, nourished them, and offered them small reflections of nature's patience. Humans have observed mushrooms for thousands of years, long before science could explain their structure or their hidden networks. People simply watched them, noticing how they appeared after rain, how they vanished with surprising speed, how they emerged in circles, and how they tended to choose calm, damp places to grow. These quiet observations shape traditions, meals, medicines, and stories. And even now, in a world full of noise and speed, mushrooms continue to remind us that nature still moves at its own soft pace. Sometimes, when I picture early people discovering mushrooms, I imagine them gathering in small groups, walking slowly through forests in early morning light, when the air still holds the cool breath of night. They would move gently, scanning the forest floor for familiar shapes and colors. Some mushrooms would be known, recognized as safe and nourishing, while others would remain unpicked, respected, but left undisturbed. This careful, mindful approach feels comforting, like a reminder that the world becomes clearer when we move with intention. In many cultures, mushrooms became part of daily meals, appreciated not for their boldness, but for their quiet presence. Their flavors were earthy, simple, and grounding. They brought the scent and softness of the forest into kitchens, linking the calmness of nature to the warmth of the home. Eating mushrooms felt like bringing a small part of the woods into one's life, a connection between the deep, shaded world outside and the slow, peaceful rituals of cooking and sharing food. There were other mushrooms, those valued not for nourishment but for gentle healing. People learned that certain fungi supported the body's natural rhythms. Some helped with immunity, others with calming the mind, others with supporting balance and strength. Even though these uses varied across regions and cultures, a shared theme existed. Mushrooms assisted quietly. They rarely brought immediate, dramatic changes. Instead, they worked with the same steady patience seen in the mycelium beneath the soil. I find comfort in knowing that the relationship between humans and mushrooms has always been shaped by attentiveness. People learned which mushrooms to trust through careful observation, passed down from one generation to the next. Knowledge grew slowly, just like the fungi themselves. There was rarely haste, rarely a need for rush. Instead, everything unfolded at the pace of seasons, rains, and shared memory. As I let my thoughts drift deeper into this connection, I imagine the calm act of foraging. In my mind, I walk through a quiet woodland, holding a small woven basket with soft sides that do not disturb the mushrooms I might gather. I step carefully, not wanting to interrupt the delicate harmony beneath my feet. When I see a mushroom I recognize, I pause, breathe, and study it gently. Foraging is never a hurried task. It requires attention, softness, and respect for both the mushroom and its place in the ecosystem. If I take one, I leave others behind, allowing the forest to maintain its balance. This slowness the way foraging encourages me to match the pace of the forest feels deeply calming. There is no need to rush. There is no competition. Only the quiet practice of being present, noticing shapes and colors, and appreciating the gift of sustenance the forest offers when treated with care. Foraging becomes a kind of meditation, a gentle dialogue between myself and the land. Throughout history, humans have also watched mushrooms with curiosity. They noticed how certain mushrooms grew on dead logs, returning them to the soil with soft persistence. They saw how others formed bright clusters on the forest floor after rainfall, appearing almost overnight. They observed how mushrooms seemed to emerge from nowhere, though in truth they rose from the vast mycelial networks working quietly below. These observations brought a sense of wonder, prompting people to create stories to explain the cycles they saw. Even without understanding the science, they understood the rhythm. There were stories of mushrooms appearing in rings, marking places where the earth was touched by unseen forces. These rings, later understood to be natural patterns formed by expanding mycelium, inspired gentle beliefs and quiet thoughts about magic or mystery. But even these beliefs were soft, not frightening, simply ways to express the natural sense of awe that mushrooms evoke. The circles of fungi on the forest floor reminded people that the world holds patterns beyond our understanding, patterns that form without noise or intention, shaped only by time and nature. As I continue resting in this peaceful reflection, I think about how modern humans still share this quiet relationship with mushrooms. Even with scientific explanations and cultivated varieties in grocery stores, mushrooms retain their sense of softness and depth. People cook with them not just for flavor, but for the comforting weight they bring to a meal. They study them to understand ecosystems, learning how fungi maintain the balance of forests and fields. They grow them in calm spaces and logs, in shaded rooms, in humid greenhouses, inviting a piece of the forest's stillness into human-made environments. There is something calming about growing mushrooms. The process requires patience, moisture, and gentle care. You cannot force them to grow quickly. You cannot rush their cycles. You simply create the conditions they need and wait quietly, trusting that nature will do the rest. When the first small caps appear, they often feel like a quiet reward, a sign that slow care and steady attention can bring life forward in peaceful ways. Mushrooms also remind humans about cycles, how everything rises and falls, appears and disappears, grows and returns. Watching them emerge after rain and fade within a few days can feel like witnessing a soft echo of life itself. There is no resistance in the way mushrooms move through their phases. They accept each stage gently, without hesitation, and that acceptance offers a lesson in calmness. A reminder that transitions can be natural and peaceful. As I let these thoughts settle, I find myself thinking about how mushrooms connect people to the places they live. When you learn the mushrooms of your region, you begin to notice the subtleties of your landscape, which trees grow where, how moisture moves through the soil, how the seasons shift. You pay attention to temperature, rainfall, and the changing scents of the forest. In this way, mushrooms become guides, small, unassuming guides that help people feel more attuned to the land around them. Even in urban environments, mushrooms find ways to appear. They may grow between stones, along shaded corners of parks, or in mulch beneath decorative shrubs. Their presence brings a quiet reminder that nature continues to breathe beneath concrete and noise, reaching upward when conditions allow. Seeing them in such places can bring a moment of unexpected calm, a reminder that life persists in gentle, steady ways. Through all of this, the relationship between humans and mushrooms remains grounded in quiet respect. We appreciate them for their nourishment, their medicinal support, their ecological importance, and their simple beauty. They remind us of patience, of the unseen world beneath our feet, of the cycles we share with the natural world. And in their presence, whether growing in forests, appearing in gardens, or resting in bowls on our tables, we find a little more softness in our own pace. As I rest in the stillness of this reflection, I feel the gentle connection humans have always shared with mushrooms. It isn't a relationship built on excitement or urgency. It is built on observation, curiosity, nourishment, and time. It is built on moving slowly, listening quietly, and appreciating the subtle movements of nature. And in the calm of this connection, I am reminded once again that the world offers peace in the quietest places. All we need to do is slow down enough to notice. As I ease myself into the quiet space of this final moment, I imagine sitting at the edge of a calm forest clearing just as night begins to deepen. The air feels cool, unhurried, and accepting, the kind of air that invites slow breaths and steady thoughts. The leaves overhead shift gently, brushing against one another with a softness that feels almost intentional, as though the entire forest has entered a state of shared rest. It is in this silence that I begin to think about the patience of the fungal world. A patience so deep and steady that it almost feels like time itself moves differently within it. The fungi beneath the soil continue their work regardless of whether I am present or paying attention. Their filaments extend through the dark in patterns that develop so gradually I can barely imagine their rhythm. They do not rush. They do not pause out of worry. They simply continue moving in harmony with the world around them. This quiet perseverance feels comforting. the kind of comfort that settles slowly into the mind like a gentle weight placed on a restless heart. I picture the sprawling networks of mycelium beneath me, perhaps centuries old, perhaps older than any tree I see above the ground. These networks have witnessed storms, droughts, flourishing seasons, and quiet winters. With every challenge, they adjusted themselves without fear or resistance. They shifted slightly here, curved gently there, always responding to the changing needs of the ecosystem. They have survived through their ability to bend rather than break, to remain flexible within the dark soil that holds them in the stillness. I imagine how these networks have learned to exist with no urgency. Fungi measure time not in days or even years, but in cycles of moisture, warmth, and natural return. Their lives are woven into the broader story of the forest, a story that unfolds at a scale far larger than any human life. And yet, despite this enormity, they remain calm. Their patience is not passive. It is steady, intentional, and quietly wise. I think about how every part of the fungal world embodies this softness. Spores drift without direction, trusting the wind. Mycelium expands without force, trusting the soil. Mushrooms rise when conditions call them, trusting the seasons. Everything about their existence carries a sense of surrender, the surrender of defeat, but the surrender of belonging, of allowing things to unfold with gentle acceptance. It is a kind of wisdom that encourages me to let go of my own need to constantly push or rush. The forest feels different when I imagine it through the eyes of fungi. Instead of seeing only what grows above the surface, I feel aware of the intricate, quiet connections threading everything together. The trees are no longer solitary beings. They stand as part of a living tapestry, woven gently by the mycelial networks beneath them. Fungi move nutrients where they are needed most. They soften soil, open passageways for roots, and help life flow through the ground like a slow-moving river. In this way, they keep balance without ever demanding recognition. As night thickens around me, I imagine the quiet glow of bioluminescent fungi scattered across the forest floor, tiny points of light that hold their own calm presence in the darkness. Their glow isn't bright enough to change the night. It's simply enough to remind me that even in places where nothing seems to be happening, life continues softly. The glow feels like a gentle reassurance that the world carries, its own quiet warmth. I shift my thoughts to the way fungi guide cycles of renewal. When something falls, a leaf, a branch, a tree, fungi begin their patient work of returning it to the earth. They do not rush the transformation. They break down the fallen wood in slow, steady movements, turning what once stood tall into nourishment for what is still growing. This process takes time, sometimes decades, and yet it unfolds without complaint. In this unhurried transformation, I find a profound sense of peace. It tells me that endings are not abrupt. They are gentle, gradual, and part of something much larger. The more I reflect on the fungal world, the more I realize that it teaches a quiet form of resilience. Fungi do not resist change. They adapt to it. They do not grow in straight lines or predictable shapes. They follow the curves of the soil. They do not seek the sun. They thrive in darkness. And yet, they are essential to the health of the entire forest. Their strength lies not in force, but in softness. Not in speed, but in steadiness. Not in visibility, but in connection. I let these thoughts settle within me, noticing how they shift the way I breathe. My breaths become deeper, more even. The sense of rushing that sometimes lingers in my mind fades into a comfortable stillness. I imagine myself connected to the ground below, not through roots or threads, but through a shared understanding of slow, patient existence. The fungi continue their work beneath the soil, and in this imagined moment, I feel as though I join them in their calm presence, even above ground. Mushrooms offer reminders of this patience. They rise gently, without announcement, often overnight. They appear briefly, fulfilling their purpose, and then return to the earth just as quietly. Their lives are short, but meaningful. They show that significance does not depend on duration. A moment can be enough, especially when it is lived softly. I picture the forest after rain, when the air feels heavy with moisture and the earth softens with renewed life. This is when mushrooms thrive, when the fungal world expresses itself most visibly. They seem to appear everywhere, long fallen logs, beneath thick ferns, clustered near tree roots. But even then, they do not disrupt the forest. They simply join it, blending into the environment with the same quiet acceptance that defines their entire existence. As I sit with these images, I feel a sense of gratitude for the fungal world's quiet presence. It has been here long before I imagined it. It will continue long after I stop thinking about it. It supports life without expecting acknowledgement, teaching lessons without speaking a single word. The patience it holds is profound, almost weightless, like a soft hand resting gently on my shoulder. In this stillness, I allow myself to feel part of that slow rhythm. The fungi beneath the forest floor do not hurry through their existence. They do not measure their lives by milestones or achievements. They simply grow, connect, nourish, and transform. Their pace is steady and sure, grounded in a trust that life unfolds as it should. As the night reaches its calmest hour, I imagine standing up slowly, brushing my hands softly along the moss beside me. I take a moment to look out across the quiet forest, sensing the hidden networks beneath every step. The air feels cool and familiar, like a quiet farewell. And yet, it also feels like a soft reminder that patience can be a way of life. That calmness is a form of strength, and that even the smallest, quietest beings can hold enormous wisdom. I take one last slow breath, letting the thoughts settle into me. The fungal world moves at its own pace, and in its endless patience, it shows me how to rest, how to trust, and how to simply be.